Chris Cuomo misleads, misinforms, misdirects, and claims that our government's response to the cooties is no different than communist China's. Now, is he intentionally misleading the public? Or does he just show up to the job 20 minutes early before taping and regurgitate the producer's talking points like a shill, not knowing what the hell's really going on in the world? Well, I'll present the evidence, and you decide. Now let's get started. I cut through the BS so you don't have to. Welcome to Media Decoded. So let's jump right in. Here's Chris Cuomo, little brother of New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, to tell us what's up. What's up, Chris?
There's a new timeline on the table. Our job is to test it. Together, as ever, as one, and now we've got one more. Wyatt Morgan Cooper. God bless. Let's get after it.
Let's get after it? No, let's get after you, you schneister.
Man, it is so good to have news of love and somebody's life changing for the better. Especially, obviously, someone who matters to me, but he matters to you too. Anderson Cooper has been your virgin. He's been helping you through some of the worst times in our world for a decade. Great news. He's got a baby boy. Wow.
Man, this guy's really shaken up over the fact that Anderson Cooper popped out a baby. Gotta tell you though, fact is, I am too.
Okay, so what are we dealing with? Politics. Politics have become part of the pain of this pandemic. The president, who said COVID was nothing, is now spinning that all these deaths, over 60,000, that he said would never happen. All this death is a sign of success.
Now, before we go on, I'll just have you know that, quote unquote, all this death is a sign of success is exactly what the president did not say. But hey, let's hear the spin.
The testing and the masks and all of the things, we've solved every problem. Our death totals, our numbers per million people are really very, very strong. We're very proud of the job we've done. When somebody uses the word successful, I mean, it really has been successful. It's been very successful.
Tell that to the families.
Okay, you see what he does here? So Chris tees up several separate sound bites from an hour-long news conference in which Trump is talking about how proud he is of the successful job they did in making sure there were no hospital bed shortages or ventilator shortages. This, when all you heard from CNN for the entire month prior was, oh, we don't have enough hospital beds and not enough ventilators. And also, the CDC forecasted many more deaths. So, of course, Trump feels the federal response has been successful thus far. But he also makes sure to comment on the death and how terrible it is and how badly he feels. But Chris conveniently leaves that out. Why? Because if he put it in, he'd actually be giving you information without a spin. And that's what a real journalist does. And Chris isn't that, clearly. Here's Trump's actual response to the questions regarding the success of the federal government's response.
Yes, no problem. Your son-in-law, one of your top advisors, Jared Kushner, yesterday said the government's response has been a, quote, great success story. Is that the right tone and message?
Well, it's just he's saying the facts. I mean, he's not talking about other things that I talk about in my speech today, that I speak about all the time, and that's death. It's horrible that what this country's gone through and what the world has gone through. I think lowering the flags would be something very appropriate.
Are you thinking about leading the country, though, in a moment of mourning for all of the lives lost, the more than 60,000 people?
Of course I am. I don't think anybody can feel any worse than I do about all of the death and destruction.
So that should give you a little taste of how the spin works. I mean, contrast what you just heard, which was his specific response to the question of, do you consider it a success, to what Cuomo puts out, just a bunch of sound bites throughout the whole thing every time he says the word success. Now that you know the truth, just watch that over and let's continue with the video.
All this death is a sign of success.
The testing and the masks and all of the things, we've solved every problem. Our death totals, our numbers per million people are really very, very strong. We're very proud of the job we've done. When somebody uses the word successful, I mean, it really has been successful. It's been very successful.
Tell that to the families.
Oh, Chris, what a knucklehead you are.
Before you jump to the conclusion that this is more about Trump, no. The answer is less. The answer is less of this talk, less of the lies, less of the jumping leadership and mixed messaging. And the latest iteration of that I think you have to take at a discount is his decision to put the blame on China. And why do I say discount it? The president has complimented China dozens of times since January and about their behavior in the outbreak and vis-a-vis COVID.
Duh, yeah. That's because in January, the World Health Organization was touting China as miraculous in regards to how they handled the response. I mean, here's the leader of the WHO, January 30, 31, late January.
The Chinese government is to be congratulated for the extraordinary measures it has taken to contain the outbreak.
So, Trump, believing the World Health Organization, and at the time, why would he have reason not to, praised China's response. What's your point?
Now the administration is planning to take broad action against them.
China is a very sophisticated country, and they could have contained it. They were either unable to or they chose not to, and the world has suffered greatly.
On the holding them accountable, is that something you prefer to do now in the next few weeks?
No, I don't want to do that. I want to find out what happened. I think we'll be able to get a very good, very powerful definition of exactly what happened. We're working on it strongly now, and I think it's going to be very powerful.
Just know this. The criticism he just levied against China is absolutely applicable to him and to the United States of America, its government. Okay? What he just said about China is every bit as true. They could have done more to control and to contain. And why didn't they? We should be asking the same questions.
Well, wait a minute. Did he just say that China and the United States have to ask themselves the same questions when it comes to their cooties response? Let's take a small look into how China handled what their response was.
The truth is, the epidemic was doubling in size weekly, and China knew it was being spread by human contact. It's just the rest of the world was kept in the dark.
Inside Wuhan, the people knew what was going on. Everybody was seeing the bodies being pulled out of apartments, and the ailing, just completely out of it on gurneys, being carried off to mysterious hospitals all over the place.
From January 7, the next 12 days are critical, as China's Great Lie continues alongside its inaction. Had China acted immediately instead of covering up, it's estimated that 95% of the eventual pandemic could have been prevented, but it didn't. It's not until January 20 that China reveals the real rate of infection. Instead of a total 40 cases, they're now reporting more than 400 a day. And they finally admit what they've hidden for weeks. The deadly virus is contagious between humans.
By then, catastrophe is looming, and January 25 is the official lunar holiday, the biggest holiday in all of China, arguably the single biggest holiday on Earth, because more human beings move about within China in anticipation of the lunar holiday than any other occasion of internal movement anywhere in the world.
During January, President Xi Jinping was well aware of how deadly the situation was, yet he made a decision that would ultimately condemn the world. He allowed 5 million people to leave the epicenter of the virus, to leave Wuhan without being screened for COVID-19.
And then, after 5 million people left Wuhan, population of 11 million, for the rest of the world because they weren't allowed to travel within China. So after they left for the rest of the world, they immediately put the city of Wuhan on lockdown and welded the people into their homes to starve to death.
把门洞都焊死了，不让出屋了。下一个就是我们6号楼了，就是我家了。焊死了，你想出来，就留一个小窗户送菜，还要付钱。把门封了，
把门封的了。你看那个电焊工在那块焊的，那中间是一个门，你看。
The Chinese government is to be congratulated for the extraordinary measures it has taken to contain the outbreak.
Okay, so to be clear, we are talking about a government who killed whistleblowers, destroyed lab samples, lied to their own people and the world about human-to-human transmission, encouraged their people to mass gather in Wuhan for the Chinese New Year, then promptly sent half the city's population out to the world while restricting them from travel within China. In other words, half of Wuhan you can leave, but you can't go any other place in China. You have to leave the country. Now go! And as soon as they left, the welding began. This is what Chris Cuomo is comparing to our response to the cooties. Spicy tuna! The truth is, CNN is beholden to China, and I'll be making another video about that shortly. But I digress. Let's get back into it.
In fact, we are. Let's bring in White House correspondent Kaitlyn Collins. What is the reporting on why coming back at China now?
Well, lately the president has been fuming internally about China, blaming them, saying that they need to be held responsible. And so our sources are saying that basically his team is creating a list of ways that they could punish China or potentially demand financial compensation for the coronavirus outbreak. Now, the question is, what ways are they looking at? We're being told possible sanctions, new trade deals. Even some people weighed the idea or floated the idea of possibly canceling some of the U.S. debt obligation to China, though we should note that two of the president's top financial advisors today said that is not something that is under consideration. But
okay, so let's stop here because there's a little bit to unpack, and it's very subtle and it's also very effective. But let's break down exactly what she said. Some people weighed in the idea of canceling the debt. Who were the some people? Well, she's implying that it's the president's people who are pitching ideas on how to punish China. But who really brought up the ridiculous idea of canceling the debt? The press. The press were the only ones to broach this subject during the conference by asking the president, would you consider canceling the debt with China over this? And Trump's answer was no. Here's an article purporting that. Now, did you also notice what she said? Two of the president's top advisors are against it? Well, how about the president himself is against it? When asked the question, his response was no, it would ruin our dollar. So why would you report that his two top advisors were against it without saying that the president himself was against it? Well, I'll tell you why. Because there's an implication here. There's a spin. The implication is some of the president's people were floating around the idea to Trump to cancel the debt, and Trump hadn't rejected the idea. Possibly may even go rogue and do such a thing against the opinion of his top two advisors. Now, the truth is a reporter asked a stupid question and Trump said no. Now, knowing the facts, I'd like to watch this again so you could see and just wonder, how did that become this? Amazing!
our sources are saying that basically his team is creating a list of ways that they could punish China or potentially demand financial compensation for the coronavirus outbreak. Now, the question is, what ways are they looking at? We're being told possible sanctions, new trade deals. Even some people weighed the idea or floated the idea of possibly canceling some of the U.S. debt obligation to China, though we should note that two of the president's top financial advisors today said that is not something that is under consideration. But basically, they are crafting a list for the president, who has been fuming internally about China. But Chris, the question is whether or not he's actually going to go through with these measures once they've crafted this list for him. Because you saw what the president was saying today about China, but listen to what he was saying just April 1st, not that long ago, when he was pressed about China and their responsibility in this outbreak.
So again, at this time, all the evidence isn't in about how it came from a lab and all of the evidence about it coming from that wet market being bogus. And it's slowly starting to seep in. And you could see Trump is a little less praiseworthy here, but he doesn't want to make a big deal of it when he doesn't have all the evidence. So he's just kind of staying neutral on the topic, which is what you would expect him to do.
People don't know where did it come from. I think we all understand where it came from. And President Xi understands that. We don't have to make a big deal out of it. The relationship with China is a good one. And my relationship with him is really good.
So, of course, the question now...
Oh my God, did he just say what changed? Are you freaking kidding me, man? What changed is the evidence came out that China lied, that it did come from a lab, that they welded people into their homes, that they lied to the people and the World Health Organization. What changed? You call yourself a journalist, really? It's nothing short of pathetic. And you could see after this, Kaitlyn's response is exactly, like they're both completely ignorant to the fact that all of this overwhelming evidence has come in that China has been heinous in their response. What changed? It's obvious what changed. Are you kidding?
So, of course, the question now is, does he go through with these measures? Exactly. He's gone back and forth so many times. If you talk to the people who speak with the president every day, they say he changes his mind on China very often, where he says they've got a great relationship.
Back and forth so many times. I mean, I recall Trump praising China, then kind of getting a little neutral, then lambasting them. One change, really, during this pandemic, and it was because of the information he was receiving from his intelligence agencies. She says if you talk to people who talk to the president every day, who's that? The press? Is that who you're referring to, the press? Of course it is. Kaitlyn, you have zero credibility.
So the question is, does he go through with these measures? And if he does, what does that do to the U.S.-China relationship?
Let me ask you one more thing, because I know you know this stuff better than I do, so why not avail ourselves of your expertise to the audience? The idea of, so he says today, I know it came from a lab, I'm not allowed to tell you that.
This is exactly wrong. Trump never said he wasn't allowed to tell that he knew it came from a lab. He was asked if he had evidence that it came from a lab, and Trump's response was yes. Then the reporter asked, what is this evidence exactly? And of course, Trump isn't going to divulge state secrets at a press conference, so he says, I'm not allowed to tell you that. Now, how did this...
And what gives you a high degree of confidence that this originated from the Wuhan Institute of Virology?
I can't tell you that. I'm not allowed to tell you that.
Become this.
So he says today, I know it came from a lab, I'm not allowed to tell you that, which is obviously being sarcastic because he was telling us that.
Unbelievable. I mean, this guy is not even present, man. He's just mailing it in. At probably 10 million a year, he's just mailing it in. But let us move on to the most spicy and delicious part of this entire segment.
Audience, the idea of, so he says today, I know it came from a lab, I'm not allowed to tell you that, which is obviously being sarcastic because he was telling us that. Now, this happens right after the intelligence folks said, we don't have any reason to believe that this virus was a lab creation. What's the explanation of how those two thoughts go together?
Oh my God, it's so beautiful! Oh, it's so beautiful, spicy. Oh my God, it's beautiful. Did you get that? So did you catch that? Trump said it came from a lab, and Cuomo says his own people say it wasn't even made in a lab. How do they get these two thoughts together? And then you watch them. I'll show you. You watch them, you're like, oh, I know. I can't believe it. This makes no sense. Really. Thought one, it came from a lab. It was leaked from a lab. It accidentally came from a lab. Thought two, his people say it wasn't handcrafted. It wasn't synthetic. It wasn't made in a lab. Thought one can't go with thought two. And look at these two knuckleheads trying to reconcile thought one and thought two. They can't do it. Between the two of them, it's impossible. It's impossible for these guys. Unbelievable. So let me just play that for you one more time so you really get a feel for this spin or the idiocy, whatever it is. And Kaitlyn's response at the end is like, there is no explanation. There's no way those two thoughts could exist in the same head. Oh, and I can't wait. So there is no explanation. Just enjoy the spin.
So he says today, I know it came from a lab, I'm not allowed to tell you that, which is obviously being sarcastic because he was telling us that. Now, this happens right after the intelligence folks said, we don't have any reason to believe that this virus was a lab creation. What's the explanation of how those two thoughts go together?
There's no explanation.
I'll tell you what there's no explanation for. There's no explanation for how you two have a job in journalism. I guess being the governor's brother and, having a pretty face can take you a long way in this world. Hilarious. Hey, listen, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe. Comment if you want. I look forward to putting out some more videos. And please take care. This is Media Decoded. Till next time.